How did we find out about it? I guess that my car owner he was a big NASCAR fan. You know, I'm a short track modified racer, and he went to the Daytona 500 every year. He went to Charlotte once in a while, and I guess he found out about it. Probably they didn't come scouting anybody. That's for sure. NASCAR, they had plenty of people, so I assume that's how we found out about it. But then before we jumped feet first into it and bought a car, we went down and watched a Sportsman race at Charlotte in 90. What did I race? 93, 94, 94, 95, something like that. But so the year before we actually ran in the division, we went and saw a race at Charlotte. And it looked cool. It was, but the process to get a license, it was, you had to have a little bit of a background in racing, which I thought was a good idea. Only because now, well, they killed off a few guys, so they were a little more careful, I guess, in their vetting process and giving out the licenses to race in the division. So they actually made phone calls. They talked to promoters of some of the tracks that I had raced at, I guess just to make sure you weren't a total hammerhead. But for the most part, Tyler, we were a bunch of we were a bunch of cowboys. We were a bunch of short track racers. I would say most of the guys that got into the Sportsman cars, they were late model racers from down south. And, there were a few northern modified guys like myself that got involved with it. But none of us had any big track experience whatsoever. Nobody ever knew anything about drafting. But NASCAR was really good with the pre-race procedure that they went through. There was always a couple of Cup drivers, maybe a Busch Grand National driver that would sit down with all the rookies. And I might be wrong. It might have been everybody who ran, not just the rookies. And they always, they gave you the same spiel about car gets sideways, don't try to correct it at these speeds, just turn it left and lock it down and let it spin to the inside. And but it was good stuff to hear from guys who had actually raced at 150 plus miles an hour. None of us had ever done that before. To my best of my knowledge, I don't know that anybody ran big tracks and then came back to the Sportsman series. I think we all looked at it as a stepping stone, possibly going somewhere. And I'm sure it worked out for some guys. Myself, not at all, because being a northerner, we are definitely the outsiders, and we don't have these tracks in our backyard. And for me to put like I say, when they closed the Sportsman series, put a Busch Grand National car together, or even a truck series. Some guys went truck racing after. It's a lot of traveling to go racing. The great thing about the Sportsman was the Charlotte race, the first Charlotte race. It was 3 races in 1 week. We ran Saturday, Wednesday night, and then Saturday again. So you got, for one tow down south from New Jersey, we got 3 races in. It was pretty cool.
Mm.
Yeah. And being Charlotte, we wouldn't go the turnpike, I-95. We'd go inland and take a few less traveled roads with the trailer. So, because you'd have to stop for gas quite a bit. It was tough. There were tough tows, a lot of mountains, and I didn't have a big tractor trailer. I was towing with a dually, but we made it. We made it work.
Mm-hmm.
So, but like as far as being a northerner racing with the southerners, we were definitely the outsiders. They didn't treat us as that, but you certainly felt that way. A lot of these cars that we raced against, they had direct contact with Cup shops or Busch shops, and had a lot of good information. Most guys were more than happy to share, because we're going at crazy speeds that we had never gone before, and you don't want somebody out there who is out of control. You want everybody to be in control. So, and there was definitely a great divide between fast cars and slow cars. So you wanted the slow cars to get a little faster and know to hold their line and not cause too many problems. Being from the north, we didn't have that kind of information. We just had to kind of figure it out. But like I said, there were guys that would help you and share info, and And the more you ran with it, the more you figured out. There weren't any guys who just jumped into this and had no racing experience. Most everybody had good car feel and had races under their belt previous in whatever divisions and understood chassis setups, and that was part of the NASCAR's vetting process again, to make sure that we were all rookies for the most part, but make sure everybody had a good understanding of racing. Mm-hmm. And the dangers of, and what have you. That was in my backyard, so that was pretty cool. Weird track though. Nothing like I had ever raced before. You drive down into turn one as fast and as far into it as you're comfortable before you lift, and then you get to this tunnel turn, and it's barely a turn. And with the Sportsman cars, if you were fast, you held it flat to the floor through the tunnel turn. Which was pretty exciting. And then you get to this flat last corner, and you're slowing down like you're driving through the parking lot to get through this last flat corner. What a weird track that was. But it was cool for me because it's an hour from my house. So all my friends and family were able to go and watch. I was going down to Charlotte. Not too many of them ever made that trip. The only regret I have is that NASCAR didn't explore more tracks. I know they ran more tracks before I got into it. I think they ran at Richmond maybe with the series, or Rockingham possibly. But when I got into it, it was the last 2 years of the series, and we only ran Pocono and Charlotte. I certainly would have loved to run some other tracks too. I wouldn't think so. Not with maybe with the Busch Grand National cars, but not with the Cup cars. No, I wouldn't think so. Let me give you a good reason. I can't even think of a good reason why it wouldn't work other than money. The cars are so damn expensive nowadays. They're not a good Sportsman car. You could build yourself, and people did it. They built their own Sportsman cars. Well, the cars nowadays, you can't really build them. The templates are so strict. You've got to buy everything from somebody who manufactures it from NASCAR, like the frames and the body panels and all that. And I don't see it working nowadays. If you can afford to race that, you're going to attempt to run a Busch race, or even the ARCA series. But the ARCA series is dying off, and that was always the closest comparison to the Sportsman was the ARCA series. But they're not getting many cars anymore, and I think the reason is it's money. You've got all these Cup teams, and they're using it as a test and tune, and a feeder division as well for these young drivers, and they're all pay rides. These guys, for the most part, they've bought their rides. They're bringing money to the table, and that's how they're getting involved there. And it's probably why there aren't many guys that do it on their own, because the cars are so damn expensive. The travel's expensive. You've got to have a full pit crew anymore, and that was the great thing about the Sportsman series. They generally ran our races, so we didn't have to pit. The only pitting we had to do was we had to take a little fuel at Pocono. We weren't allowed to change tires unless they were flat, so you didn't necessarily need a big pit crew. But being what it was, most of us had good pit crews because guys enjoyed traveling to these tracks, and it wasn't every weekend. It was a couple times a year. So we always had a good following. Most teams always had a good following, just because you're rubbing elbows with the Cup guys and the Busch guys, and you're going to historic tracks like Charlotte Motor Speedway, Pocono, and it would be the only opportunity you're ever going to get to turn a lap there, unless you rent the ride and do the ride along thing.